everybody, welcome back to another book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing The God of Small Things by Arundathi Roy. So this is Arundathi Roy's debut novel, and this tells the story of a family tragedy in Kerala in India in 1962. And while this has a really tragic storyline beneath the plot, Roy crafts this really complex, politically charged examination of stolen innocence and human desperation, and it's just brilliant. I really enjoyed this. In fact, it's the first book that I have given a 5-star rating in a long time. This copy has obviously seen better days. I just think it's such a rich, animated novel, and it's woven with some of the most spectacular descriptions I've ever read in fiction. It's definitely a novel with very many faces, but I loved every single second of it. So this is going to be an incredibly glowing review of The God of Small Things. It's going to take me a while to get the family right. So basically, 7-year-old twins, Esther and Rahel, live with their divorced mother, Amu, and their grandparents, so Amu's mother and father, and then their uncle, Shako. Recently divorced, has recently returned home from Oxford, England after divorcing his ex-wife Margaret, and he leaves behind Margaret and Sophie Mole and comes back home to live with the family. But after his ex-wife's new partner dies, he invites Sophie Mole and Margaret to come and stay with him over the Christmas holidays, and so sets in motion this tragic, fateful series of events which ultimately culminate in the death of Sophie Mole, which isn't actually a spoiler because you find that on very early in the book. And then in this kind of dizzying, non-sequential narrative style, the book flits to and fro between different time frames before the accident, after the accident, and kind of pieces together everything that leads up to that event and the consequences that it has for everybody involved. Even though the pace is a bit spinning and the structure is a bit jarring, for me it kind of fell short of completely confusing. I think it just kind of nestled itself into this whole new concept of the narrative kind of reflecting how lives don't always make sense and how memories and lives and events aren't always linear in our memories or in real life, especially from the perspective of children. And it's really interesting because we do get the perspective of Esther, the 7-year-old boy. And I think one of the most enjoyable things about the book for me was that kind of juvenile perspective. I think Roy's depiction of Esther's innocence in particular sets the reference point by which we experience the whole of the book. And I think she just writes about such adult, nasty themes, but with such a kind of childlike sense of confusion and innocence and naivety. And I think that kind of sets up such a strong and such a strong and kind of hard-hitting contrast. I think it was very clever the way she did that. On the one hand, we kind of have this brooding, atmospheric, dark tale, and then on the other hand we have the kind of naivety and the innocence of children, and then she brings them together just so wonderfully and poignantly, and just kind of really drives home her message, which will stick with me for such a long time. The consequences of small things can have such big repercussions and such devastating repercussions in this case. And there's this one quote that she keeps coming back to, which Esther eventually kind of really takes on as his motto, I guess, that things can change in a day and it's best to be prepared. And I absolutely loved this book. It was different to anything I've read before. I read it as part of my Diversathon TBR, and I'm so glad that I did. It had been sat on my shelf for a really long time and I'd never been feeling it or never thought to pick it up, and had I known how much I was going to enjoy it, I would have read it about 10 times by now, I'm sure. So that is it for my review of The God of Small Things by Arundathi Roy. I really hope that you enjoyed. I'm sorry that this was a probably quite biased review because I just sung its praises. I realised that this novel is not without flaw, but it was just a magical read for me. I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend. I think that it's maybe quite an acquired taste. The language is very very complicated, and at times it can be quite dizzying, but please don't let that put you off. If you've read this book before, or are planning to read this book, or have never heard of this book before but just want to comment down below, then please do, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!